I first met Pete Droge, must have been 1978 or 79, when his family moved in down the street from us. We quickly became pals, started smoking cigarettes, weed, and listening to music together, everything from AC/DC to Alice Cooper to the Stones. Eventually, we formed a band called March of Crimes. Pete being the first of a trio of notable guitarists that would later include pre-Soundgarden Ben Shepherd and pre-Pearl Jam Stone Gossard. But Pete Droge, with his faded jean jacket and his Ibanez Les Paul Sunburst knockoff, was the first. I was the singer, and I didn't even have a mic when we first started. I sang through headphones and a guitar amp. We practiced in Steve Nelson's living room. Well, after a hot minute of a little teenage fanfare, I pretty much ended my musical career at 16. But Pete went on to form a roots band called Strayland Street, and then the late great all-country band Ramadillo, who we talked about a couple weeks ago with Peter Blackstock. And eventually Pete moved on to a successful solo career in the late 90s, which saw him tour with Tom Petty, make guest appearances on the late-night TV circuit, and even have a hit song in Dumb and Dumber, as well as a cameo in Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous. Then at some point, he kind of just went into exile on Vashon Island, kind of stopped touring, quietly began producing other people's projects, most notably the aforementioned Stone Gossard, who'll be joining us here in a few weeks. Pete has recently rejoined public life, released a new record, hit the road for the first time in years, and lived to tell about it. So I'm thrilled to have my old friend on the show today. Please welcome our fresh face in hell, Mr. Pete Droge. Pete, thanks for joining us, man.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, man. Well, I hear I've heard that you're actually an avid listener of the podcast. Is great.
I am. Long-time listener,
I was
first-time caller.
I was wondering who the other person that was listening besides me and Jason was. It shows up on our analytics. So somebody's out there listening.
That's it. It's me.
So some early memories of our association. I remember when your house burned down and you lost everything, and I cried, and I was so upset for you because it was a exercise in empathy, and I wanted to give you half of my stuff.
Right.
And then after a few months, the insurance paid out.
Yeah.
You were riding around in that sweet Dan Gurney American Eagle BMX bike.
That's right.
And I was just jealous as hell. I was ready to torch my own house because I had the Sears. Mine was also called an Eagle, but it was the Sears Eagle. It wasn't even alloy. It weighed like 50 pounds and shit.
Yeah.
We were pretty creative little fuckers. I mean, some of the stuff we did, I remember we started an easy listening duo called A Cool Breeze. I think you maybe remember that. We do the intro like direct from a smash engagement at the Fairmont Hotel. This blissful duo. And do you remember the name of the song?
I believe the name was Come Take My Hand.
Yeah, Come Take My Hand.
What do I win?
Job. Nothing. You win my admiration. It's the only other person. We will stroll across the land. And then there was the time my grandpa came in and we were just stoned out of our gourds. I have a picture of that. Jason, I'll find it. We can put it in the Substack. But we were just stoned. And my mom ran out and she's like, your grandfather's coming out. Air this place out. We'd been hotboxing it. And we just ran around madly, airing the place out. And we sat back down on the couch and I got a picture of we were so baked. I mean, just slit-eyed, just like melting into the couch. And he came out and he's like, hey, anyone got a fig? We're like, what the fuck is a fig? Good times.
Yeah.
So then we started March of Crimes. And I wanted to, do you remember the first March of Crimes song?
That would be No Other Way.
Yes.
Ding, ding,
this
ding.
is kind of this is your life, Pete Droge.
Yeah, No Other Way. A C C G G G A.
Yeah, that's
slow,
right. It's
slow and then fast. Down the land, down the land, down the land. Yeah.
When I started with the brilliant conceit of reading the definitions of war and peace out of the straight out of the war, a conflict of arms between hostile parties or nations.
That's right.
Peace. Yeah, that was so funny.
That was it.
It's so funny, dude. Poor Andy Veterani kind of gets the shaft because there's a March of Crimes ended up being kind of a little bit like Art Blakey and the Messengers, Jazz Messengers, like people coming and going that eventually went on to prominence like you and Stone and Ben. But like nobody ever talks about Andy fucking Veterani, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to a book club at his dad's house like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, you
And
did? Nice.
so yeah, and I gave Andy his props just so he
Great.
got his place there.
Yeah,
So
we're
now
we're
let's
our footnotes in rock history right there, right?
yeah, well, when you kick Stone Gossard out of your band, you're gonna have to account for that decision.
That's
Um,
right.
okay, so now let's pick up the thread of your musical journey after March of Crimes. To
Okay.
me, well, 25th Hour.
Yep.
Yep.
That was it.
Talk to me
A
about
bona
20.
fide that was a garage band, quite literally. We played in Brian Fenner's garage, and, I believe you got us our first gig, or I think our only gig, actually, at Top of the Court,
Right, in
which
the
was
U District.
a very short-lived club. I tunneled around online because I wrote a Substack post about my first gig, and, I could find very little about Top of the Court. There was just, like, a little window in, I think, late '84, early '85 where there's some gigs, and whoever was booking it had great taste because there's some great bands on bills there.
It
But
was a
we
weird
opened
little venue. It was upstairs, and it actually had
Yep.
windows behind the stage, which is kind of odd, as I
Yeah, you
recall.
went upstairs, and it was like a long rectangular room with low ceilings, so we were not allowed to let off our flash pots, which was heartbreaking. We had
Well,
the whole pyrotechnics were ready to go, but they wouldn't let us roll with that. And
my
the bill
favorite
was
memory.
Yeah, yeah.
Go no, keep going.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Um,
bill was us and then The Accused and Malfunction. So not a bad first gig there. It was cool.
yeah, yeah, and I remember Regan was out in the crowd. My favorite part is, like, you played a shredding version of Love Gun, right? Like a
Yeah,
cover, but
as
then
our opener, yeah.
Yeah, but then Regan Hager at the end is just giving you shit because he's older than us, and he's just kinda like big brother shit, and he's like, "Play Love Gun again, play Love Gun." You
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
kinda look at each other, it's like, "Is he
yeah,
serious?"
yeah,
And he had played
yeah.
it again, and we were
And
just
I was adamantly against the whole idea of closing with the same song that we opened with, and then
hey,
there was a little bit
bookends.
of debate among us, and then suddenly, "Ba-da-da-da, da-da-da-da,
That was
da-da-da-da-da-da,"
awesome,
and,
dude.
okay, we're in. Bah, so,
And then I
yeah.
remember you and Doug Parks were amazing at the high school talent show. Is this fun for you listeners? Me and Pete, this is your life, Pete. I'm using this as a Pete and I don't talk often enough, so I'm using this as a sort of opportunity to catch up a little before we get down to brass tacks. But I was thinking about you and Doug Parks, who knew Doug Parks? That guy could. He was kind of a stoner kid, ski bum kid, but he could harmonize like a motherfucker. And I
Yep,
remember at the talent show, you guys killed it 2 years in a row. One year you did Behind Blue Eyes. And
that's
one
right.
year you did Wish You Were Here.
Okay.
At what point did you say to yourself, "Music is my calling. I'm gonna go for it, and I'm gonna try to make a living at it"?
I was super into it from a really young age. I remember, just as a really young kid, like, wanted to be in a band and do all of that. I remember a vivid memory right out of high school when I was going to Cornish College of the Arts studying jazz guitar, laying in bed and just thinking like, how do you do it? Like I had literally no idea what to do. Like, do you look up the address of a record company on the back of a record and mail them a cassette? Like I had no clue. And I remember kind of looking around at the landscape of music at the time. This would have been 1987, 88, and just all the people who were doing the music that I liked were older, and had been doing it a long time. There was really nobody else that I could point to that was making the music that I was into that seemed to be having much success. I mean, there might have been some examples of that, but not many.
Well, what was
So
happening locally wasn't really in your wheelhouse, like Screaming Trees and Soundgarden and, like,
yeah,
that stuff wasn't happening at you. So, as I recall at that period, you were very into, like, Beggars Banquet, like, very
oh
into
yeah,
Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. And I remember you were making some great I told you I found one of those demo tapes from about that era. There's even a Christmas
blackmail,
song on it. Yeah.
blackmail.
No, it's actually great. But what I loved about it is it was just kind of an extension of the shit we would do in my room. It was creative. I mean, dude, I swear to God, you made a demo where I think you were using Tupperware containers
Yeah,
as drums and stuff
yeah,
like
pots
that.
and pans. Yeah,
Yeah, but it had a Mark Bolan Tyrannosaurus Rex vibe kinda, because sometimes their
right.
drums sounded like Tupperware,
Yeah,
the bongo.
yeah.
Um,
Those cassettes. I mean, around that time, Stone Gossard landed me a demo deal with Michael Goldstone at Polygram Records. And, Stone had kind of dug those funky, weird home cassettes I'd made. And I actually brought the pots and pans to Reciprocal Studio, the famous studio where, Nirvana cut Bleach and Soundgarden and all that was done. And
I
I
spent a lot of
brought my,
time in that studio. Rick
yeah,
Hinklin, was that his name? Rich Hinklin?
Rich. Yeah, Rich
Rich,
Hinkling.
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember. I was in there a lot with you and just other bands.
Yeah. So I brought the pots and pans into the studio and, and did like a, fully realized version of that tune. But yeah, I mean, as far as like, I do remember at that, 18 or 19 years old, just feeling like I knew I wanted to pursue it and I had no idea how. And you just do what you do and you get a gig at a coffee shop. That was kind of like the thing that was in reach. And I used to play up at, I forget what it was called, up on the Ave. Those are like some of my first gigs. And
Oh, it's the
then,
Last Exit.
no, I actually before that in high school, speaking of Doug Parks, we used to go out there and do the open mics at Last Exit. That would have been some of my really early experiences on stage.
Which, of course,
So,
was homage to the novel Last Exit in Brooklyn, because it was the
yeah,
last exit and it was on Brooklyn, just
there you
for
go.
people who don't know Seattle.
Yeah, yeah.
So who was your first sort of like post 25th hour, which, 25th hour, to give people perspective, where you had Brian Fenner, he and his brother Eric, who were just awesome. They had a Christian rock band before that. So, but 25th hour was just kind of something you got involved with. It wasn't, it didn't have the signature Pete Droge stamp to it. It was more like, the Kiss thing, that was you. You were part of the Kiss Army when you were a kid. But I think, what was it like? Was it Strayland Street? Was that the first, who was your first musical, like, partner? Would that have been Sean Muggeridge, the first person
Yeah,
you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna make
yeah,
music with this guy?"
yeah, so Sean and I were in, 25th Hour together, and then, once we moved over to Seattle, we started, a trio with Mark Boquist, and that was called we named it Strayland Street after one of my songs, and we started playing gigs around town, like super small places, like we'd play what was it called? The Jewel Box or something back behind the Rendezvous, remember that little room?
Oh, of course I do. Yeah, no, it was a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
room. You could get about
yeah,
40 people in it at tops, but it was a great
yeah,
room. The sound
yeah, it
was
was
good.
great.
Yeah, it was like a little miniature theater.
Yep. And so we started gigging around there, and we took a trip down to Austin because at one point we thought that maybe we didn't quite fit in Seattle, and we thought about relocating to Austin. So we all went down there and partied and had a wild time. And on the train ride back, the word armadillo was misspoken as Ramadillo, and we're like, "That's our band name!" And so we became Ramadillo at that point. Um, and gigged around a lot. As you know, you were our MC for a good
Oh,
part of
yes,
that time.
yeah,
The
that was
highlight of
fun.
the show. The Mark would start with the train beat, and you'd come out with your train whistle. Woo hoo! That was great.
Still kind of hanging around in the music scene years after he'd been in a band by that tenuous
Yeah,
thread. Hey, he's
yeah,
still got a big mouth. He can talk in time. So, but I had
yes.
fun doing that. It was a lot of fun for me. So Ramadillo came at a time. We talked about this with Peter Blackstock recently. Ramadillo, that is, oh God, 92, 93.
It would have been 90, 91, I think.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was into 91, into 92, maybe the early 92. I think we broke up.
And it really had nothing to do what was going on at Sub Pop or, as we said, Screaming Trees, Mudhoney. It had nothing to do with that, but it is also sort of a testament, I think, to the Seattle music scene that it did kind of effectively get folded in. I mean, it became a lot of the same crowd a little bit. You started getting the people like the people that would Tim DiGiulio and people who would eventually be in like a little more rockier versions, rock band. I mean, the crowd kind of overlapped, even though it was not at all what people were thinking was coming out of Seattle. What was that like? And alt country was barely a word or not yet a word
I don't
yet.
I don't
Like,
think it was a word yet. Yeah, it was before. It was definitely before that got coined. Um, you know, there was kind of a little micro scene. There were the Pickets.
mhm.
Lazy Susan was in there. Bathtub Gin was kind of doing more of a roots rock, classic kind of vibe. But it was a micro scene compared to just the tidal wave of the louder, dare I say, the G word bands. But we all cross pollinated and we all partied together. We were on bills with all of those bands all the time. Um, and I remember, like, speaking of Rich Hinkle and his brother Paul, I had played one of these, I think it was one of the ASCAP showcases or something at Rock Candy. There are all these heavy bands, and there was some of the sort of like Chili Pepper-esque funk bands around those bills too. And I came out just with an acoustic guitar and like did my strummy songs about my feelings thing. And I remember Paul coming up to me afterwards going, "Man, that's like, you're so brave. Like, how could you do that here?" In this, grungy, stinky rock club to come out with an acoustic guitar. But sort of backing up, like with Ramadillo, like we were, it was more of good time music than where I kind of ended up going on my own. And that was part of what I think was sort of what caused us to break up was like I was kind of wanting to move more towards singer-songwriter vibe, and Ramadillo was, squarely in, more of a bar band kind of vibe, just boot scooting, good time music that people could dance to and drink to and stuff. And I was kind of
Yeah,
burning out on
and
that.
that
And
pedal steel was always good too. I still
yeah,
got a weakness for it. I break out my Ramadillo tape now and then. I was thrilled when they re-released the single of
yeah,
Devils in the Best of Moods. That's still getting airtime in my garage on
nice.
actual vinyl, which is exciting. I like to have
Yep,
all my music. I'm a dinosaur, right? I got iTunes, but there's hardly anything on it. Everything is still vinyl. So I'm excited. Also, you're going to send me the new record, the
yep,
new re-release of the old record when it comes out too. Then I
yep,
will have two of your vinyls in my collection.
nice, perfect.
Okay, so let's talk. Was there any acrimony with the Ramadillo thing? Because you guys were kind of gaining some steam. I remember you went down to South by Southwest, and it was like you were kind of gaining some steam regionally, and like you were kind of fitting in Austin. And it was just shortly after that, like when you broke up and you kind of went your way. I mean, how was that? I mean, bands are difficult. Bands are like marriages, you know what I mean? So, like, I mean, you guys are all good. How did that work out? This is 35 years ago, but like, I mean, when
Yeah,
I talk about bands, this is always one of the interesting things I talk about. I'm always interested in the politics in it, especially if somebody who's married. I mean, just that relationship can be hard enough to navigate. And I've been in, a band, and
yeah.
where people are quitting all the time or not showing up for shows. And so, like, talk to me about that dynamic. Did that have anything to do? Because once you kind of went on your own way, you never really, until you had Elaine, who became kind of your partner later, you didn't really have you weren't part of a group anymore. It was you.
I definitely was happy to go solo after the experience of being in a band. Kind of there's a moment that's seared in my memory with Ramadillo where I brought in one of my slower acoustic, singer-songwriter kind of songs. And I could kind of feel, I don't know that they literally rolled their eyes, but I could just kind of feel the energy like, okay. And then I sort of brought it up like, what, you don't want to play this? And the comment was something along the lines of, well, people are going to leave the dance floor if we do this. We're going to lose the momentum. And that was kind of in my mind. That's where I kind of started to think about another path. So that, I remember that as sort of a moment for me where I kind of felt like this wasn't the right vehicle for me. And I also feel like, we got to the point as a band where we were spending more time at the Blue Collar Saloon having band meetings than we were actually in the rehearsal room making music. And I don't even really recall, what we were talking about in these band meetings, but I do remember it not being fun anymore. And then I think, another kind of tipping point, our New Year's Eve gig at the Backstage. I don't know if you were at that show. It was like a KEXP, maybe Roadhouse concert, something sponsored thing. And I just got hammered. And we were like, we were not Young Fresh Fellows were technically the headliner, but they went on at midnight and then we went on after them. And they had these huge bags of like Costco popcorn that they had exploded all over the stage. So the stage was like covered in like whatever butter-esque type material that they used on this popcorn. And I was just drinking all day and it was not pretty. And I said some stupid shit. And that I think was a moment there of like, okay, this is kind of run its course. And I don't even really know if it was me who clearly said I want to break up the band, or if they were ticked off about the New Year's Eve debacle or not. I'm not sure exactly.
So, where do I transition from here? Uh, this begins. You you got a deal after once you decided to go solo. You started what writing solo material
Yeah.
and got like an album's worth. And then is that when Stone got you or introduced you to Michael Goldstone, or was that later? You got to help me
Actually,
with
that
the
came
timeline.
before. Yeah, the Goldstone thing happened, I think even maybe before Ramadillo. That was sort of in the pots and pans home 4-track days.
Mm.
That's when I was working at Tower Records or Tower Video. Um, and I remember I got fired from Tower Video the day after Thanksgiving. I worked on Thanksgiving. I came in the next day. I was 15 minutes late and they fired me. And I came home and I was really bummed, and the phone rang and it was Stone. And he's, "What's up?" I go, "Oh man, I'm really bummed. I just lost my job." He goes, "Well, you're not going to be bummed for long. I just got you a demo deal with Polygram." So yeah, that
Yeah,
was,
that'll make your day a little better.
yeah, that cheered me up. Yeah. So I did that. That did not lead to a deal. And then it
But they were giving
was,
out developmental deals then. You got a little cabbage for development and recording and things like that. See, that
yeah,
was
they
I
give me like,
remember when the people who came to town, the A&R. I remember Kristen Berry got a development deal. People were getting development deals. It was like that was a new thing for Seattle, you know? I mean, everything else that had come out before via Sub Pop kind of arose organically, but there was that period in kind of as you got into the 92, 93, 94 in there where people were actually the record companies are like, huh, you know, I mean, they're actually giving money that no longer exists. I
yeah, it
mean,
was modest. I mean, it was a $2,000 budget. And I probably should have like honed in on like 3 or 4 songs, but I just made like a whole 10-song cassette album with the money.
but
Um,
$2,000 is a lot of money then too.
oh my God, it was like $1 million to me at the time.
But like, so this is the point where you're like, I want to get into the psychology of where you're at because you know, I'm going to ask uncomfortable questions at times too because your trajectory is very interesting. It's very shall I say it's kind of Fitzgerald-esque in this second act is that like publicly, you know, we see the rise and then now we're getting right to the where we're going to start rising to the apex and then I want to go into the second act and then I want to end up here on the third act, which this is my conception. I think in narrative. So start me off when things really started to hit with you. That was Necktie Seconds, right?
Yeah, so essentially, so that first demo deal, nothing came of it. Ramadillo kind of did its thing, and then I did about a year of like solo band stuff around Seattle. Kind of felt like I was spinning my wheels. I moved to Portland in January of '93 and I met Elaine immediately, and she started singing with me on gigs, and then we went down to South by Southwest. And actually, right before I moved to Portland, Mike McCready uh, gave me money to make a demo, and we went to Bear Creek and cut a 5-song demo. And that was what. And then Kelly Curtis, Pearl Jam's manager, heard that and started working with me. And we started shopping that demo around. And by the time we got to South by Southwest, there were a bunch of labels there. And that Monday, we had like multiple offers from major labels.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, so moved to Portland in January. Literally had to quit my job at the pizza restaurant to go to South by Southwest because I'd already done a couple little mini tours, and he's like, "I can't give you any more time off." So I said, "Okay," I quit the job and then went to South by Southwest, came back, had a deal, and then we started working on getting ready to make the record. And by that November, we were in the studio with a great producer who was also my A&R guy,
Yeah,
Brendan O'Brien.
Brendan O'Brien. Yeah, right. I
Yeah, yeah.
remember it.
So Mike McCready had been working on the second Pearl Jam record with Brendan and had given him the tape.
We have
And
to take this opportunity because I haven't talked. I mean, I've had Jeff on the podcast, and I'm having Stoney in a few weeks. But I need to talk about Mike McCready for a minute because he deserves. He was such a nice fucking guy, dude. He was like a saint. Like I just remember when Pearl Jam started to hit. I mean, the fact that he gave you money. I just remember when Pearl Jam hit. He was almost embarrassed of his success. He was so nice. Every time you'd see him out at the bar, he had a tray of drinks. He was like buying rounds for everybody. He brought all his friends new gear. He was buying people Marshall half stacks. He's such a sweet guy and who people don't talk about. Like he's not always besides being a guitar god, but I just I had to say my little piece about what a sweet guy he was and how refreshing it was to see somebody because people react differently to success. We got to see a lot of that because we saw a lot of our friends just kind of blow up suddenly as this is where we are in your trajectory. You started to blow up suddenly and you see different people react differently to it. Some people get big headed about it. Some people like Mike, it was a source of humility. And I found that really educational for myself because I was still 15 years away from any kind of success. But like I saw cautionary tales, I learned things, I learned about grace, and you know what I mean. So it was really interesting. But at the same time, I felt kind of left behind. You know what I mean? Oh, all my friends are famous now. Like what the fuck? Um, okay, so back. I just had to say that thing about Mike McCready because I just wanted to. He's just such a gracious person. I haven't talked to him in a long time. Um, so all that stuff started happening really quick after the move to Portland. Brendan O'Brien produces their record. and that's Necktie Seconds. And then things really start getting kind of surreal for you.
Well, it was all kind of a slow burn, like the record came out that May and, just very quietly came out. There wasn't a lot of heat on the record when it came out. We couldn't find a tour to get on. They were trying to get me on opening tours and like we almost got a Collective Soul tour, but then that went away. And eventually, someone had the idea to do a residency tour where we would just go out and headline clubs in the same city in a loop for 7 weeks. We went out to the Northeast and played New York, Boston, Philly, and DC, and then we'd plug in other shows on the off nights.
That's
And
really
that,
interesting. I've never
yeah,
heard that, because Sub Pop did that with a bunch of bands. I noticed like Reverend Horton Heat. It was almost like they lived in Seattle for a while, or the Fluid bands that were from Denver and Austin that kind of came. I didn't know you ever did that. That's interesting. So
yeah,
that
yeah, that's what
that
we
was
did on
kind
the
of a
first tour.
thing. Was that kind of a
You know,
thing? I mean, other people in music have done. I mean, like I said, I saw Sub Pop do that, but that was a thing. It's called a loop
well,
tour. I didn't know
it
anything
was
about it.
kind of, yeah, residency tour, they called it. It was really new at the time. I think they had told me that Chris Isaak had done something like that before, but prior to that, I don't think it had been done much at all, or if it had, we didn't know about it. We just knew about the Chris Isaak thing. And it proved to be really successful because, like in New York, we were at a club called the Fez every Monday night. And, the first week we were there, it was like, record company people and the wait staff or whatever. And then it slowly built. We had a friend and a fan there who was, really, tied into the cool kids scene in New York. And he actually made his own flyers and started handing them out to all of his cool tastemaker friends. And as the weeks progressed, we had, like Trent Reznor came down, Sheryl Crow sat in with us one night. Everybody from Nile Rodgers to John McEnroe, like all these celebs were turning up. Suddenly, by the 5th week or whatever, the guest list has got, Rolling Stone and MTV. And it was just kind of this nice organic build.
And you're
Um,
only 26, right?
I think
Roughly.
so. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
25,
So
26. Yeah.
talk to me again. I'm fascinated with the psychology of all this. Talk to me about how this is working on your self image, your ego, your like, I mean, I know you're saying it's a slow burn, but it actually is a pretty fast trajectory in certain ways. And you're a pretty young guy. You've stopped drinking by this point, right?
No. Oh God, no.
Oh,
No,
okay. So,
fully, fully.
okay. So, like, I think we all like to know, like, what's going on. How are you feeling about this? You got to be feeling pretty big on yourself at that point.
Not really. I was probably more riddled with self-doubt and, I think, part of the reality is keep in mind, this is like the mid '90s, which is like the peak of album sales. So, whatever, quote unquote success I was having at the time was dwarfed by all the blockbusters, that were my peers. And, sharing management with Pearl Jam, it's like, how do you compare with that? You know what I mean? Like, oh, I
Yeah,
sold
I had the
however
same
many
agent as
records.
Saul Bellow. I can relate. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So um, yeah, I always felt like it always felt like, I don't know how to put it, but, um, in those days, I was so hard on myself. I had such high standards for myself that, I can remember like playing a sold out show at the Crocodile. And it's like, people are loving me and it's great. And I'm just totally fixated on the guy in the back of the room with his arms crossed going, he didn't deserve his deal. Like that was the
Yeah.
inner dialogue in my head.
Interesting.
Um, so I definitely, was not like riding high, like how great am I and feeling super confident. Um, I
But you
had,
have to project that too, though. And that's the hard thing when you do something performative like that is if you're full of like, and I'm full of self-loathing and self-doubt, but like if you get up and you pick up the mic, you gotta project confidence. So like that's interesting because I didn't, you know, you can't see that going on, as an observer.
um, yeah, let's see. What can I say about all that? If you were to track a chart of my success and then a chart of like my mental health, they would go in the opposite direction.
Ah, okay.
There was a period of time and, so like by the time, that residency tour wrapped up and then we did another one in the Midwest, which was super grueling, really long drives. Everybody got sick. Then we came out to the West Coast. Things started to pick up again. That's when we got the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack and the single started to take off at radio. And then we headed back to the East Coast. We started doing some dates with Melissa Etheridge, playing arenas. And at that point, things were picking up enough heat where they were just dragging me around like crazy. So we were in a van and trailer chasing Melissa Etheridge's bus. So all the tour is bus, it's rooted for buses. So these grueling drives. I would literally arrive in town, get picked up by the radio promo person, take me to like 3 radio stations, go to sound check, have a snack, do the show, do the meet and greet after the show, get in the van and drive all night, sleep for a few hours, wake up, drive again, radio, radio, radio. It was just like super grueling. And, it was, I remember at one point during that time, we had one day off and it was like, great, we can finally do laundry. And it's like, okay, now you need to drive way out of your way in the snow to play a record store for 7 people. So it was really exhausting. Once you start doing well like that, you start getting press from people who don't really want to talk to you, but are being assigned it. And so you get more kind of passive aggressive interview styles, of like, in the beginning, the label was really cagey in that they didn't go after press. The only press we got was from people who wanted to write about the records. We got like lots of glowing positive stuff, but then you start getting the sort of jaded person who's, doesn't dig what you do. And then, kind of gotcha questions and mean-spirited press or whatever. So anyway, at that whole time, it was just, as I reflected back on it, I used to kind of refer to it as like a nervous breakdown. And now it's just such a blur that I don't even really remember how that manifested. But it was a really kind of a challenging time for me.
The grueling nature of what you're doing with these residency tours is not, and drinking, it can't be helping the mental, you're just worn to a nub, right?
Yeah, I don't want to paint too bleak of a picture because there was also a lot of really super fun stuff as well. Um, Especially as we turned the corner into 95 and we got a tour bus, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Because then you can, go pass out in your bunk and get some sleep or whatever.
Harder to stink up a tour bus, a lot more
That's
square
right.
footed.
Um, I lost my train of thought there.
You were saying it wasn't that
Yeah,
dark.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I didn't want to
Yeah,
paint
yeah.
too bleak of a picture.
It was up and down, but definitely, things continued to sort of build into 95. That's when we landed the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers tour, which was just, still like a total highlight of my
Dream.
life,
Yeah.
total dream. And, and things were a bit more cush at that time. It was a little bit easier to get through that than it was the early tour stuff. But
And you're getting some external validation in a way that you don't get when you're doing the journeyman stuff. You're on a bus and you're opening for a fucking legend like Tom Petty. That's gotta feel like almost a relief after just playing 7 shows in 7 days. And
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
when I look
it
back
was,
at knowing you, that kind of seems like a big, like the apex there. Was that Tom Petty tour? Maybe you don't view it that the same, but that's around the same time you're doing the late night talk show circuit and stuff like that too,
yeah,
right?
all
That
that
was
kind of happened around the same time. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I would say about all that is I did not take to being what my friend Chris Ballou and I refer to as famish, not being famous, but kind of famish. Like that I think there's some people who kind of get in that role and they just bloom and blossom and it's fantastic for them. I didn't do so well with that. Like the idea of like walking through the airport and getting recognized was just weird for me. I wasn't comfortable with that aspect of it. I wasn't comfortable with, um, you know, the kind of thing where, you can't tell if somebody kind of knows who you are and puts you on a pedestal or not, like trying to decode those sort of vibes. When I was younger and, and also had, plenty of crazy drunken nights that I probably am not proud of in my past of like, oh, does this person remember me being completely belligerent and out of control or, all of
yeah.
that kind of stuff was, in my head at that time as well. So I think, it's like I wanted a lot of the benefits of fame and success, but I didn't actually really pair well with the actual fame side of that equation.
I understand that sense of like, I mean, there's a sense of pride when somebody, when I like it is like when I'm reading a good review and I go, they get me, but it's not a real FaceTime thing. And I can just kind of sit back there and enjoy it. It's like, yeah, somebody sees me, they get me, or I get a fan letter or something like that. But like, it can be really uncomfortable to interface because I mean, for me, I feel embarrassed. Like, I feel like I don't deserve it or say, you know what I mean? Like, part of me thinks, yeah, I've got self-confidence as an artist and I do deserve it. But like, then when it happens and I just like, if somebody starts gushing over you or something, it's almost kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, I used to, again, I should mention that like I've done a lot of work, therapy and everything else to sort of to grow up a lot since this time. But in those days, if somebody would come up to me after a show and be like, that was amazing. Like my internal dialogue would be like, well, what do you know? Like, didn't you catch that, this was fucked up and that was, I couldn't, I wasn't comfortable just sort of like, yeah, you're right. I'm fucking great. Um, so, and like I said earlier, I had like really high standards, and a tendency towards perfectionism. And, and so, and it's a challenge. Playing live is just a tough racket. You can't control what the monitors are going to be like and what it's going to sound like on stage. And, um, so I was really tough on myself. And, if I could go back, I would just tell myself to sort of ease up and just enjoy it more.
So we still got to talk about the Thornes, Almost Famous, and then I wanna talk to the time where, at least in my perception, well, talk to us about the Thornes really quick.
So the
How that
Thorns,
how that developed.
that developed, it started with a writing session with myself, Sean Mullins, Glenn Phillips, the front man from Toad the Wet Sprocket, and a producer and songwriter named Marshall Altman. And we gathered at a studio in LA and we wrote a couple songs. And the idea was maybe we would kind of do a group. Glenn Phillips had just, not, it was pretty recent from him leaving Toad the Wet Sprocket. And so didn't have any interest in doing another group. He wanted to really focus on solo. Marshall Altman, who was great, just kind of didn't quite fit in stylistically. And I think from the label perspective, did not have enough of a name to sort of justify it. And then, but Sean and I had good chemistry. And then Sean shared a manager with Matthew Sweet. And he was suggested to come in. And both Sean and I were big fans of Matthew's. And again, we gathered in a studio in LA. And the minute we sang together, like we all knew that we had something with, sort of Matthew's high reedy sound and Sean's rich baritone. And then I kind of slotted right in the middle. We could tell we had something special. And after we cut these demos, we had a record offer from Aware Records, which was part of Columbia. And it was pitched to us like, this is going to be like a low key kind of side project. We're not going to do big music videos or any of that stuff. But as fate would have it,
You
as
did do a
these
video, I remember.
oh yeah, yeah. As our demos started making the rounds, we would do these demos where we just set a mic up in between the three of us, and whoever kind of brought the song to the party would play the guitar, and we would just do our harmonies around one mic. And we made these really, I hope those demos see the light of day one day, because to me, it's kind of the coolest stuff we ever did.
Do you
And so
do you
those,
have access to them at all? And when you say see
they're
the
in a
light of
they're
day,
in
do
a
you
box. They're in a box somewhere around here. Yeah.
oh, but you can listen to them?
Yeah.
Because that would be horrible if, like, you knew it existed. I went through that for years, not that it was any good, but, like, we made this March of Crimes demo specifically for Jello Biafra because we
Yeah.
were supposed to play with him that night, but we did not play him, but we're gonna meet him, and we didn't even have time to make a copy of the demo, and
Oh
so we
shit.
get yeah, no, we recorded it, like, normally, we'd go over to Ken Westby's dad house because he was like a radio evangelist, and they had this, like,
Hmm.
you could copy, like, 8 tapes at a time. We didn't even have time, so we gave him the original tape, hoping, and maybe it'll get us a deal on Alternative Tentacles or whatever. Nothing ever happened. And then 25 years later, I'm sitting with Ben Shepherd at the treehouse, and I'm like, remember that tape we made? I've been regretting for years. I just wanted to hear it, partly because I engineered it and I thought I did a
Hmm.
really good job. Well, it turns out I didn't. It's just to jump ahead here. It sounded like
Spoiler.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounded like shit. But like Ben goes, duh, you don't understand. Jello is a complete pack rat. He'll have it. So he texts him right then. 5 minutes later, Jello sends us a picture of the thing. It was kind of a life-changing moment for me to know that something that was lost, it wasn't good. Like I said, I mean, everybody else was good. I was never good in the first place, but I was just, when you said that, like, if those tapes were lost, the tapes with you and Matthew and Mullins were
Yeah.
lost, that would just be tragic. Like, because I got a lot of old manuscripts and stuff flying around. It's good to have that stuff.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I don't know where it is. It's buried somewhere, but it would be cool maybe with the what would it be, the 25th anniversary edition, maybe we could throw the demos on there or something. Um, but anyway, yeah, so those demos kind of worked their way up the food chain at Columbia until Donnie Einer, who was the president of Columbia, kind of a legendary music biz guy. And suddenly this thing that was going to be kind of a low-key side project, was a $500,000 record with, again, with Brendan O'Brien producing. And, I'm on a private jet from Atlanta to Nashville to record a 22-piece string section of, members of the Nashville Symphony with Paul Buckmaster arranging. It just, it ballooned into this much bigger thing. And again, the record got a lot of excitement at the label, and suddenly we were, a priority at Columbia. And that was, ultimately with the writing, we did all these writing trips together where some of the times we would go to recording studios. Another time we went out to this ranch. A friend of Matthew's had this 100-acre horse ranch up in Santa Ynez. And then we spent, the better part of 2003 on tour. And the record did okay. But, to me, the highlight was getting to work with Jim Keltner. So that was another amazing moment. So we actually, when Brendan O'Brien was interested in working with us on the record, we all met at Sunset Sound Studio in LA, and we did a couple songs just acoustic, and got our harmonies and our acoustic guitars down. And then Brendan was like, okay, we're making the record. These are the basic tracks. Who should we get on drums? And it was like 3-part harmony from Matthew, Sean, and I. We're like, let's get Jim Keltner. And so sure enough, Jim came down and played on those 2 songs. And then we flew him out to Atlanta to make the rest of the record. And, so getting to work with him was just a total dream. He was a hero of mine forever. And spending time with him in the lounge, getting all those stories was just amazing. And we did some cool tours. We did a long run with the Jayhawks, kind of a co-headline tour with them. That was a highlight. We got to play Royal Albert Hall, like 2 nights, opening for the Chicks over in Europe. We got to go down to Australia and New Zealand. So it was a cool time. And just, a treat to get to work with people who are that good. I mean, both Sean and Matthew are just masters at what they do. And, to be in a room with them and, to write songs and see how they do it and witness their greatness was a real honor for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So now I want to talk about, from my perception, you kind of dropped off the map when you moved to Vashon. You started, I didn't see you touring as much. I didn't see you out and about. I don't think you had a major label deal at that point, but you were producing a lot of stuff at Monkey Tree, the studio?
Puzzle Tree.
Puzzle Tree. Oh, that was close.
Yeah.
And I know you got a great spread out there, and like me, you're kind of I know that you're kind of built for it, the hermiting. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to leave my place out in Squim. I just want to stay my whole life there. But take me through that, because like, we've gotten all these highs and all this activity. What is, to up this point, a very busy life in music and the record industry and so forth. And then, you just kind of settled in and kind of dropped out of public life a little bit.
Well, yeah, the Thornes thing was an interesting time because I had the Thornes record come out on Columbia, and then I had my solo record, Skywatching, which was released on a label called United Musicians, which was actually like a label collective of artist-run labels that was run by Amy Mann and Michael Penn and our manager that we shared, a guy named Michael Hausman. And so that was like, they had distribution through Red, which was through Sony, but it was very much an indie release. So to juxtapose my life kind of doing my indie record versus being in the big meat grinder of Columbia Records was a really fascinating juxtaposition. And, not to sort of badmouth majors or whatever, but, the Columbia thing was like, we were presented with, here are your options for your cover of your single that the president of the label has chosen for you. Like there wasn't a lot of like creative control. It was like, it all kind of got commandeered. Um, and
That's a
yeah,
story I hear over and over from musicians. Like in publishing,
yeah,
we actually, even I'm at Penguin Random. It's the biggest publisher in the world, but there's still writers have it. I mean, it's still, I can say yes or no to the covers. I can go, let's go
yeah,
back to the drawing board, even in that.
yeah,
But for musicians, especially, I mean, in a way, you were lucky enough to get to be a part of that last gasp of the big music infrastructure, to get a taste of it, because it's just foreign to guys starting a band today that are just going straight to the streaming services and stuff. They have no idea that like the reps had reps and every record store had a rep. I mean, there was just
yeah.
such a massive infrastructure. It's cool that you got to, as much as it felt like being in the meat grinder, it's kind of cool that you got to experience that.
Yeah, it's all part of the journey, and you learn a lot. And part of what I learned was that I was done with that whole world. Just again, that same sort of grind of the promo machine that you get on when, at a record at that scale. So I kind of felt like at that point, um, I was really content to kind of throw my hat in the ring as a film composer was something I was really interested in doing. And I loved producing records and I loved being in the studio. Like always throughout my entire life in music, I've always thought like, if I had to choose between the studio and live, I like no brainer. I would always take the studio. I love working in the studio. I love writing. I love recording. So, that period that you're talking about where I kind of, was happily flying under the radar, a lot of that was, I was busy as hell during that time. I was working nonstop. In fact, during the Thornes time, I was every day I was not on a Thornes tour, I was either producing a record here in my studio or working on a film score. Like literally every day.
And that wore
Um,
you down, didn't it?
it did, yeah. And so by the time the Thornes ran its course and did, well enough that I had some royalties coming in, I remember that spring of, I guess it was 2004, like took time off. I don't think I'd ever really taken time off before. I remember just laying in my backyard and there was a family of ravens that were nesting in the fir trees on our property, and just like, laying around and watching the baby ravens fly around and just like decompressing. And from that point forward, like I, uh, I just started the next record I did was 2006. That was Under the Waves, and, was pretty content to pretty much put all of my eggs in the film and TV licensing basket, which I had had a lot of really good luck with that previously. Um, so I just happily chose not to do any of the other stuff that you're kind of expected to do to promote your record, and just sent it around to music supervisors that I knew, and we ended up having fantastic luck with that record. Like that was, from a financial standpoint, that was the most successful record I've ever had because I owned it all, and the licensing on it was just crazy. So that was kind of like, oh, this works pretty good. I don't have to go out and do the dog and pony shows. And
So when it was about what, two God, I'm so bad with years, but at some point, God, maybe was it like 10 years ago you started to have the health issue?
almost exactly 10 years. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
September
hey,
of
I
20,
guessed right.
2015. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I was
2015.
gonna guess 5 years, and I go, "No, you're
Yeah,
always too quick," so I guess 10. Yeah,
yeah.
what was that like? I mean, like, you just describe the condition, tell us about it, because that was like a chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah, yeah. So what happened was, in September of 2015, my system just crashed. And I was kind of tracking it on my calendar, and I could go back and look at my calendar, and it's like, totally exhausted. And then the next day is like most exhausted ever. Like I was just like so fatigued and exhausted that it was like I remember just the mantra was like, I can't believe how tired I am. I just was completely taxed. And, at the onset of it, I was just in bed for a few days, you
So, like,
know?
physically tired, though, not just the anxiety of, "Oh my god, my schedule's overwhelming,"
Oh, yeah.
anxiety. This
Yeah.
is more of
Yeah.
a
Oh, yeah.
physical manifestation, yeah.
Physiological. And the first doctor that I went to, my dad had died that May. My mom had progressing dementia and didn't remember that my dad died, so we were replaying this over and over with her. "Where's Arnie?" And, "Oh, dad died." And it was really stressful. She was in assisted living and there were wandering incidents. So it was a really, really stressful time on top of the grief. Um, and my body just crashed. My system just crashed. So the first doctor that I went to, at one point, Elaine had walking pneumonia. And I thought, I must have walking pneumonia. That explains it. I got tested. I didn't. And she did another round of tests and couldn't find anything. And then eventually she says, well, I think you're just depressed, and wanted to put me on antidepressants. And I've dealt with depression throughout my life. I know what that is. And this wasn't that. This was, I kept saying it's physiological, like it's in my body. Like this isn't just,
Burnout.
an emotional thing. It isn't just burnout, like something's off. And eventually, I won't go into all the details, but, around the corner of the next year, I found a doctor that suspected that Epstein-Barr virus, the virus that causes mono, was part of it. And that I tested positive for that. And that became a long treatment. The treatment for that causes die-off, which makes you feel worse. And then eventually ended up finding another specialist in San Francisco. And I won't go into all the details of all the diagnoses, but discovered that there's a perfect storm of things that individually all point to fatigue, and sort of the combination of them just
And you
led
beat
to
it now somewhat. I mean, because otherwise you wouldn't be as active as you are now.
I'm still squarely in the chronic fatigue zone. It's manageable now. It's up and down with the workload that I've got with the new album. This year, I've had about 4 episodes where it's really cratered and has been severe and, um, really, really challenging. But the good news is that those episodes don't last long, maybe 3 days. And then if I take care of myself, I kind of rebound. But every day I experience fatigue still. Um, I think part of my ability to do what I'm doing now is like, it has to do with acceptance and just, being okay with it, and being at peace with the fact that I have to let some plates crash to the ground. I can't keep all the plates spinning, and I have to accept that there's a million things that you're expected to do to try to get the word out about a record. And
Oh, I
yeah,
don't
totally.
know.
So, a lot of it is acceptance and, just being at peace with the way I feel. And, it's workable now though. So and I'm big into gratitude practice. That was something that was really something that I leaned on a lot through the really most challenging years. The most challenging years, I couldn't really do anything. I would literally, get out of bed, and as I was making my little cup of decaf, because, one of the gurus said, don't drink caffeine, be making my cup of decaf, and I would just immediately, I've been on my feet for 5 minutes, and I'd just be like, this feeling of just like wanting to curl over and just like no life force and just completely exhausted. And then I would go up and try to field emails and stuff. And I would just be like, after like 10 minutes, I'd be like, I got to get back horizontal. So that was really debilitating, super challenging. And for me, a big part of the journey has been to reconcile my workaholic nature, which is my drug of choice that I substituted after giving up drugs and alcohol. So it was a really interesting journey that I went through all of these years of, asking questions of like, well, who am I if I'm not my work and my career? It's really easy, I think, to hang your sense of self and identity around your accomplishments. And
Yeah,
so,
my kids saved me from that actually. Otherwise, that would be
yeah,
my doing in. I have to, as much as I did for Mike McCready, because I still want to talk about your mom's uh, adoptive and birth, because that's going to dovetail in the first album. But we're getting down there. But I have to take a moment to just say how amazing Elaine Summers is. I mean, as you talk about this, like what an amazing support system you've had through Elaine. She's so
yes,
talented. She's such a great singer, songwriter in her own right. And like the stuff she does with pottery and all the shit she posts online. I just had to give her a shout out. Um,
absolutely.
now we got to talk about your moms, because we're going to talk about the new record Fade Away Blue, and to me the story of this record is your moms, both the passing of Jan, who of course I knew so well growing up,
Yeah.
and your search for your adoptive mom, and the two sort of signature songs on the record that speak to one of them. So tell me the story of Fade Away Blue.
Yeah. So, what the cornerstones of the album touch upon my experience as an adoptee. And the lead track on the album is You Called Me Kid, which is a song that I actually wrote for my dad after he passed away in 2015. And what I was saying when I played it live was like, I wrote it for my dad, but I dedicate it to both my parents. So, the lyrics are, you called me kid, and I can't thank you enough for what you did. You called me kid. Never in this life could anybody find a more generous or precious gift to give. So this is, a song of gratitude. You knew my parents. They were
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Arnie was
And
great. So was Jan.
oh yeah. And so, um, that's the lead track on the album, and then the flip side of the adoption coin are songs like Song for Barbara Ann and also Lonely Mama, which this experience of kind of unearthing everything about the adoption and learning about something called ambiguous grief that I never knew about, learning about something called adoption trauma, which is
Talk,
something I
talk to
never
me
knew about.
briefly about ambiguous grief. This is right in my wheelhouse.
Um, I'm, yeah, I'll try to parrot it as well as I can. It's a term that was coined by Pauline Boss, I believe is her name, in the 70s. And there's a variety of versions of it. As it relates to an adoption experience, you can sort of grieve for the relationship that never was.
Hmm.
So the sort of having that, like, oh, what would my life have been like had the sliding door has gone a different way.
It's like a
Or
biologically shaped mom hole in you.
yeah, or yeah, I'm not sure if I'd put it that way or not, but yeah, I'm not an expert on the ambiguous grief thing yet. I probably should have done a little more recon before I started doing
I
podcasts.
just
But
I hear
as
a
yeah,
catchphrase like that. That's a
yeah,
psychology thing. I want to know about it.
yeah, I think with adoption, it's in my case a big part of it was grieving. Like I say in the song, pining for someone who I never knew. It's like the grief that I experienced. So just really quick, I'll do the bullet point version of the story. So, Thanksgiving weekend, I had this flurry of coincidences and a computer glitch that led me to realize like I'd been kind of doing some self reflection and soul searching and looking within at that time. It was around the time I was turning 40. And um, through this computer glitch, I found a file that had the incorrect date, and the date was 1969. And I was like, that was the year I was born. And in that moment, I like flashed on myself as a newborn infant. And I just like had this light bulb moment, like my adoption, like, yeah, is that a thing? Like, should I maybe consider that as I'm kind of looking into all this soul searching that I'm doing? And sure enough, the research that I did, I learned a lot about, the separation from the birth mother. People believe that that's a traumatic experience, and that your early development as a baby is colored by that trauma. Um, and so I unearthed and unpacked a lot of stuff during that time. And once it was a few weeks later that I kind of felt like, okay, I think I'm ready to connect with my birth mother. And I applied for the birth record in the state of Oregon. And 3 weeks later, it arrived, and I searched the name, and all I found was the obituary. And that was ambiguous grief for sure, because that was like, here I am having, this really intense grief and sadness around this loss for this person that technically I never really knew. Um, and
But
it
your
was a,
body knows, your DNA knows, man. We've had a
yeah,
lot of guys that talk about DNA on this show and like
hmm,
and also generational, the epigenetics and things like
yeah,
that. But yeah. So
yeah.
like yeah. Go on.
So the album really was born. I mean, that song for Barbara Ann, I've been calling the keystone song of the album. Like everything else had to live alongside that album. And it was a tune that I had started recording back in 2013 as part of the Droge Summers Blend project, and ultimately decided to keep it for a solo record because it was such a deeply personal song. Um, and the rest of the album is sort of like kind of a autobiographical thread runs through the rest of the song. So you kind of come into different periods of my life, like, the drug fueled psychedelic teenage years and a song, Sundown at Francis Nash, or you were there,
Oh
you,
yeah,
you remember your birthday party
parties.
and
I'm still there. Yeah.
your
Like
birthday
200
party.
hits of
And what was it?
LSD.
87 was it at,
I don't shit, I don't
uh,
remember. I just remember I had 2 sheets of acid from Charlie Cadronell and I was passing them out
and oh my
and
God. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyhow.
crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. So anyway, yeah, Song for Barbara Ann is, a really deeply personal song for me. And again, credit where credit's due. That was a co-write with Elaine, and sort of backing up to what you were talking about. This whole process, I owe so much to Elaine. She was an incredible partner and a great support for me through all of it. And we sort of poured it into the music. And during the fatigue years, I really came to the point where if I could do one thing, what would it be? And that was songwriting. And so through the fatigue years, I did manage to do a lot of writing, and that's what ultimately became this new record.
He is Pete Droge. The record he speaks of is his new record, Fade Away Blue. Look for links and info in the podcast description. Also, I'll talk about it in the Substack. If you're not familiar with the breadth of his earlier work, which we've discussed in great detail today, dig into that as well. Also, Pete will be at the Triple Door on October 10th to celebrate the deluxe double vinyl reissue of Necktie Seconds, and I'm getting a copy of that for free. There's a few perks to being a podcaster.
That's
But
right.
Pete, I wanted to thank you for opening up. I know I like to ask people hard questions, take them uncomfortable places sometimes. I appreciate you being your candor and your willingness to be our fresh face in hell today, buddy.
Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate you.